Hi, welcome to Ask the Manager from home. And we're going to only talk for about a half hour. And so we'll get started right away. Of course, there's no guests. It's just Mr. Mizikar and I. And I'd like to say kudos to Mr. Mizikar because the selectmen were full of compliments last night during their meeting, referring to him as thanking him for his exceptional leadership and what a great job. And none of that was surprising to me. I was very happy with the comments that were made by the selectmen. So congratulations to you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Donna. I appreciate that. I certainly appreciate their comments as well. And yeah, to be reappointed officially to a second term for 3 more years. Although the last month has felt like 3 years, it's in some ways the first almost 3 years have flown by, but it's also kind of hard to think that it hasn't been 3 years yet. So I don't know, mixed time feelings, I guess.
And a lot has happened in the 3 years since you arrived, and there's been a lot of forward movement, a lot of changes. And now here we are in the middle of COVID-19.
Yes.
And so what I'd like to point out is that you reported on March 24th that we had 3 cases. And today we have a total of 165 cases. It's April 29th. And in that time, it seems that for the first few weeks, we were doubling every week, a little more than doubling. And now we're sort of on what I think is more of a plateau where we've gone from between 0 and 4, is it, for the last several days. And I hope that's a good sign. And I think it's from the social distancing that people are very conscientious about as they move about town. What's your opinion of that?
Yeah, I think that the social distancing certainly is working. The previous 7-day trend is up a little bit over the prior 2 7-day time periods. So we've had almost 8 on average. And that is, it's not a huge spike, but I think, and I hope, as I know you do, that yes, that's where we're at, that we're in the plateau of the peak. And we're all patiently waiting for a real downward trend that we hope to see in the coming days and weeks. I think that we won't know that we're in the downward trend until we're maybe 4 or 5 days into it. I think Shrewsbury, unlike maybe some of the other larger municipalities like the city of Worcester, or Boston or, Framingham, it's a little harder to understand what our trends are because, we can certainly go from a 4 to a 0. And you want to get really excited about the 0, but you can't because the difference between 4 and 0 as our number of cases continue to climb just becomes statistically insignificant. It's not, something that we can really get that excited about. So we certainly, it's going to take a little bit longer to analyze our numbers than it does some of those bigger communities that have more volume of testing on a day-to-day basis. There could just simply be days where there's no one that gets tested in the town of Shrewsbury, not necessarily because of lack of testing, but just because it doesn't happen.
Now, between April 17th and the 24th, we jumped 50. We went from 105 to 155. Part of that was the system reporting.
That's right.
Glitch. I wondered also if it was related to anything where we have group living in town or nursing homes. Was any of that connected? Because my first reaction and comment was, what if this is connected to a nursing home that everyone was tested at once? Did that happen?
Yeah, I'm very, yes, but I'm very limited in being able to share details of where that happened, but that does play into it. Both of those kind of collided in a little bit of an explosion, for lack of a better term. I'll just briefly, so the state uses a statewide system called MAVEN. It's an epidemiological clearinghouse, and it's not new to COVID-19. That's where we would get reports on tuberculosis and HIV and AIDS and all these other communicable diseases that, you know, the public health community is very familiar with. What happened with the system glitch was that whenever they went to this enhanced tracing program, they allowed a lot more people with all the right credentials to be able to access the system. And therefore, when they started to update the system in a different way and another facet for the main numbers, the communication wasn't perfect on that transition. So we were looking, you know, in where we always looked within the system to see what our numbers were, and they weren't there. They were on another aspect or screen that was a little bit more secure for us. And so there was a little bit of crossing in the dark, so to speak. So that's certainly rectified, and that's no longer a concern. But I guess I can confirm that there was a little bit of enhanced testing at some of the facilities within the community during the same time period.
Now, I retired as an infection control nurse a couple of years ago. And so my family has to tolerate all of my instructions and everything that I'm making them do compulsively. But I actually put the number of cases on a calendar every day. And my son thinks that, you know, I've lost it because I'm tracking this, but I find it fascinating to see how it generally is moving and as it directly relates to our town. But schools closed on March 13th. School continues to be out. And your public buildings closed on March 15th.
Right.
The playgrounds in the town, in the schools, and in the tennis courts, et cetera, all closed. I don't actually have the date for that. But a lot has happened. You see so many neighbors walking and waving. And I live in a development where I don't even know half of my neighbors because you would get up and go to work, and now everybody's walking and waving, and it's actually pretty nice. It feels more like a neighborhood because everybody's around. But now annual town meeting and the town election both were postponed. And last night you set dates for these main events. So
we set a clear date for the town election of June 16th. That's a Tuesday. And we're going to do a very intense campaign to get voters the opportunity and inform them of the opportunity to vote by mail. You can call it absentee voting, you can call it early voting by mail, or just voting by mail, whatever you want. There's no underlying criteria like an absentee ballot, but it'll work that same process. In a couple weeks, you'll be able to contact the town clerk's office, tell them that you want the option to vote by mail. They'll mail you out a ballot. You have to mail it back into the town hall. I hope, I won't say we, but I know many people will share this, including you, hope that this will actually increase the total number of voters. You heard Sandy Wright probably say last night that the most percentage of registered voters that we've had in just a strictly town election has only been in the teens in the most recent 5 years. So I hope I would love to see 100%. I'd love to see 75% or 50%. And I think if we see those numbers, then we have a good case to make to the state that says, quit making people have some excuse to vote by absentee, just allow people to vote by mail. So obviously in these cases, that the ability to vote by mail will reduce the number of people at the polling places. That certainly still will be an option on June 16th if someone wants to do that, or folks do want to do that. We do anticipate it. We'll have personal protective measures in place for voters and for our poll workers to keep everyone as safe as possible. But we're highly encouraging everyone to vote early by mail. And early doesn't have to be early. It just has to be in the clerk's office by June 16th. So, we certainly encourage everyone to do that. And I hope to see, let's set a goal of over 25% if I can do that.
So I think I heard the date of May 6th, that the voting opens May 6th and goes until June 16th. So it's
That's right.
So it's an extended period of time. And will it be as simple as calling the town clerk's office after May 5th?
Yes, it will.
May 6th, excuse me, May 6th. Just
Yeah.
calling?
So right now, today, the town clerk notified the printers of our ballot printers, of the date, and that we're ready to have them printed and to receive them. So we hope to have them in hand in a week. That is their normal turnaround time. And then as soon as we have them in hand, or even a few days before, again on May 6th, you can request that we mail you a ballot, and then we'll receive it back from you before the 16th. So it will be 35 days or so, or 40 days that you'll have the option to be able to vote. We didn't set an official date for the annual town meeting yet. I still am a little nervous about doing that. I certainly do not have the information in hand that I need to be able to make a budget recommendation, because I don't have good revenue numbers, both on our side and on the state aid side at this point. So I'd like to wait for that.
But doesn't it have to be, excuse me, doesn't it have to be done by the June 30th?
It has to at least be scheduled before June 30th.
Scheduled, okay.
Yeah. And then once we schedule it by June 30th, if the state of emergency is still in place, the authority transitions over to the moderator, and he's able to continue that for 30-day increments up until 30 days after the state of emergency ends. So if my plan in my mind is that if we're not in a position where on May 26th, we feel comfortable signing a warrant, we'll go ahead and set the date pretty much for June 30th, knowing that we'll likely just reschedule it beyond that point in time.
And going back to the election, the voting time will be different. So if you don't get a mail-in ballot, the voting time won't start until 12 noon and go to 8 p.m.
That is correct.
But Sandy, our town clerk, still urged people to, as many as possible, to do the mail-in voting, because it just makes it safer for everyone.
Absolutely.
But she did talk about how they would clean the pens and so forth in the voting stations, but it still puts people at risk by having them in a confined space. So it seems pretty easy. All you have to do is you'll make the phone call and get your ballot and be able to vote. So I look forward to that experience myself.
Yeah.
Now, how will you conduct public hearings for town meeting if we're still doing this isolation?
If we're still in this situation, the meeting agendas all have on them, like the Board of Selectmen last night had a public hearing related to, a couple licenses that require public hearings. When there's a public hearing opportunity, the agendas have the detailed link to the virtual meeting. So we're using Google Meets. And so the agendas have a phone number and a PIN for individuals to be able to call in and participate in. And you hear the long, maybe you've tuned it out, prelude that the chair of whatever committee is meeting reads. And he's indicating how individuals during the public hearing are able to participate. So during a public hearing, the first thing that happens after the Board of Selectmen or whichever committee is makes their own comments is that it is opened up to any public members to identify themselves who are interested in speaking. And once that role is taken, we go through them sequentially. So it's a little bit more staged and less fluid than an in-person, but there still is that opportunity for people to call in and engage and make their comments. Not ideal, But as you know, a lot of times when we're even meeting in public, there's not a lot of people that show up there. So again, maybe this is an opportunity that more people engage within the process because of convenience.
It will be interesting, and it'll certainly be an experience. Now, what are the tax bill changes?
So the tax bill changes that went in place changed the due date of the May 1st tax bill to June 1st. And there's no, so that's an official date change. And then if a payment isn't made by June 1st, penalty and interest on the tax bills is not accruing. Well, it is accruing, but you won't have to pay it if you make the actual payment before June 30th. If you do not pay by June 30th, the penalties and interest are accruing from June 1 forward. So certainly based upon personal financial conditions, if taxpayers need the additional time to wait to make their payment, they certainly have that opportunity. But just want to remind folks that penalties and interest are accruing from June 1st. But as long as you pay them by June 30th, you wouldn't be charged that. So that's really the significance of the change of the date, that it's not accruing from May 1st. It's only accruing from June 1st. So please pay everything by June 30th.
And for those who have the ability to pay, you still would like them to pay on time?
Yeah, we really would. And it provides us with data to understand the real impact, at least the near-term impact on the town's financial conditions. So if everyone would pay on June 30th, we wouldn't have a high level of confidence in what we can do in fiscal year 21, which means we cut more than we actually would have otherwise had to if we had a better data set on hand. And I'm not trying to strong arm anyone in a financial situation that they can't afford to make the payment until the last minute. But it is important for us to understand just how hard it is hitting folks. And if you're able to make the payment, we ask that, you do so.
Now, the pink bag recycle, is back in the system. It started on Monday, the 27th.
Yes. So, yep. So they have found a way, to keep their employees safe and be able to manage their communities in Massachusetts. So that has been reintegrated. So everyone that has taken time to clean out their closets of textiles and other related things now can take the pink bags out of the garage or the shed and put them out at the curb, and they'll be picked up, and a few will be dropped back in kind. So it's actually nice to see something reinstituted and everything just not continuing to close up. And, depending on your questions, Donna, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about reopening before our time is up today.
Okay. So I wanted to comment. My husband was in Price Chopper when the aisles were instituting one way and the enforcement of that. And he came home and he was all excited and was so impressed because there was he assumed to be a store manager telling a man that he not only had to obey the signs, but he needed to leave the store because he knew the rules and he had been in there the day before, and she told him to leave and don't come back. So it's nice to be able to appreciate that someone is watching out for people when they do go into the stores. And that is something that's instituted in all of the grocery stores around town. So people are doing their job. Why don't you talk about the reopening a little bit before we go any further? Because the rest, pretty much a lot of what I have has to do with other items and your financial impact.
Yeah, so thank you. First and foremost, we've designated a task force within the town government that's going to be led by Assistant Town Manager Kristen Lass to make sure that we are ready to reopen as soon as the virus allows us to do that. So, what does that mean? When would we come back to a more normal staffing level? When would we come back to having public buildings open to the public? And when that does happen, what provisions will we put in place, just like you mentioned, Price Chopper and other stores have put into place to keep our employees safe and keep residents that need to come in to access town services within the town hall safe. So we certainly think that we're going to have to, have plexiglass shields in place like you see everywhere now, that we're going to have proper, kind of lane markings within the hallways, as far as helping residents and taxpayers out when they're in the building. But we're going to strongly consider the whole floor plan of the town hall. And, some of our offices, like the treasurer collector's office and the town accountant office and the school administration, are open cubicle type arrangements. And we are going to spread out and utilize conference rooms that people can be more appropriately distanced from each other, once we go back. But first and foremost, we're not going to run back and, just go back to full staffing and back to having people in the town hall. And we're going to look at our business from an essential and non-essential standpoint. And beyond the town hall, we'll consider, the council on aging and doing what's right for the elder population, the library, and doing what's right for our employees, and the heavy volume and touching of materials and things like that. So we are planning now for that day where we can start to, see the decline from the plateau and also move back in the right direction. And then I'm very happy to say that you've heard the governor talk a lot about his advisory committee that's being led by the lieutenant governor that has 17 people on it. I'm fortunate not to be on that committee, but to be on the Massachusetts Municipal Associations committee that will be advising the municipal leaders that sit on that committee. So I'm one of 10 members, 10 town managers from across the Commonwealth, including the city manager in Worcester, town manager in Acton, town manager of Arlington, town manager of Situate, town manager of Needham, just to name a few, who are developing requirements and advising that central authority on what it will take for the municipal sector to reopen. And obviously, we think the municipal sector has one of the broadest scopes, because what I didn't talk about in our local reopening plan is our outside facilities, our parks, our recreation facilities. During the summer, our school athletic fields are rented out and being used. People are going to want to know what we're going to do for Independence Day and Memorial Day and how we're going to handle those celebrations. So I'm fortunate to work with that group of talented managers to help advise the Lieutenant Governor's Advisory Committee on how municipalities will reopen. So we certainly have a lot of work ahead of us. We had our first meeting yesterday, Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock, facilitated by the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Municipal Association, Jeff Beckwith. I'd like
how did you meet?
Via Zoom, of course. I'd love to be able to be in the room and share my opinion stronger and do different things at certain times. But, it's a wonderful group to work with, and the right group of people to work with. I'm sure we'll come up with great solutions. And, in building those solutions, we've asked town staff and for feedback, and they've all been very responsive. I think I had about 12-hour turnaround time for their thoughts to help inform my thoughts prior to going into that committee. So it's all hands on deck. I know there's a lot of, or seemingly some controversy out there about how soon we open and what civil rights we're offending, and that's certainly not the case. I know from, someone in my position the whole way up to the governor, et cetera. So we're doing our best to find the safest route forward.
And so we can be confident that Shrewsbury and Central Mass is well represented.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's great. I received this in the mail from the library. Yep. And it gives information as to how you can access the library services. And I found it to be very helpful. So Priya Rathnam, if I'm saying her name right, is our new library director, Rathman, and she's already going to town, making sure people have access given the circumstances that we're in. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that as a resident of town. The work on Beale is still going on.
Yeah, it's continuing. We're following the governor's guidelines, and we're fortunate to stay on task. On the public infrastructure side, we've kept our head down and put our summer highway projects and water projects out to bid, and we're seeing more people, more entities bid on those. So I think we're continuing to do what we do here in Shrewsbury, is put ourselves in the best position to get the best value, because those bids are coming. When you have 12 entities bidding on a single paving job, you get really good numbers. And so I'm very happy that we elected to continue to do that. Now, doing the work, and when we do it, we'll be very communicative and make sure that the contractors are safe in their work practices if we're able to do that. But we'll take advantage of any situation that's put in front of us to do the best for the taxpayers in town.
And street sweeping continues. Street sweeping went down our street today. My street looks nice and clean. Yep. And you, the selectmen voted to participate in the feasibility study for regional emergency communication and dispatch.
Yes.
How do the fire and police feel about that?
Both chiefs are supportive of undertaking the initiative to determine if it's the right step. This is really step one of who knows how many steps over several years, potentially. Both chiefs are always very forward thinking and realize that if there's an opportunity to provide the same or better services at a lower or equal cost, if the service is better, they're willing to do that. They always have been. So I'm very grateful to have their support, and I'm looking forward to working with our surrounding communities, Westboro at least, and many other towns in the region to determine if that's what's really best for Central Mass.
I think it'll be interesting to actually see and view the results of that feasibility study, because, of course, I can't see past the advantages of having it locally in town, but I think it'll be interesting to see what the other side is, and what that information gives us. We only have like another minute, but in a quick nutshell, what would you like to tell us about the financial update? I realize with COVID there's, certainly an impact, but you have plans and you have a good plan. Do you have anything you want to tell us in less than a minute?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of modeling work, and as the governor say, models are models, and it's just an attempt to give ourselves an idea of what we may be working with. It'll be critical to get information on state aid. It's the next big milestone for me to see, how big the impact is going to be and how we move forward. I'll tell you, the budget could look radically different than it did this past February. I hope that it does not. But we're certainly going to put a task force together. We're going to have two of them, one on reopening and one on rebudgeting. And we're going to use it to our advantage to think differently, think innovatively, and see how we can provide better value without reducing services to the residents.
Well, we hope that this has been helpful to the residents. It's a little different than our typical Ask the Manager, but hopefully we're getting the information out there. And I'd just like to say thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.